When Pam Bondi walked into the office on her first day, the room went quiet for a moment. She smiled politely, holding a small notebook close to her chest as she greeted the receptionist. There was something calm about her presence, nothing loud or attention-seeking, just steady and composed. Yet that same quietness made a few people in the office assume she wouldn't last long. In a place where confidence was often mistaken for volume, Pam's soft-spoken nature stood out. The office was known for its fast pace. Phones rang nonstop, people spoke over each other in meetings, and deadlines seemed to hang in the air like storm clouds. It was the kind of environment that either made you tougher or sent you packing. When Pam joined, some of the older staff exchanged looks that said, "She won't handle this." They had seen new hires come and go, especially those who looked too gentle for the pressure. Pam didn't seem bothered. She quietly found her desk, introduced herself to a few people nearby, and began setting up her things. She placed a photo frame by her computer, an old picture of her parents, and a small plant beside it. It gave her corner of the office a little warmth, something rare in that busy room filled with gray cubicles. The team leader, a man named Dennis, came by to give her a quick rundown. He spoke fast, barely pausing to see if she was following. Pam nodded patiently, jotting down notes in her little book. When he finished, he asked, "Got all that?" She smiled and said, "I think so. I'll figure the rest out as I go." Her calm answer caught him off guard. He expected nervousness, maybe even hesitation. Instead, she just seemed ready. By lunchtime, Pam had already noticed how things worked, or rather, how they didn't. There was tension between departments, unspoken competition among co-workers, and a lot of rushed work that led to mistakes. But she didn't say anything. She just observed quietly. While others chatted loudly in the cafeteria, Pam sat by the window, eating slowly, watching how people interacted. She wasn't shy, just thoughtful. She believed that understanding people was the key to working with them. Over the next few days, she learned who complained the most, who quietly fixed problems, and who took credit for others' efforts. She didn't judge anyone. She simply paid attention. Her first assignment was small, organizing data for a client report. It wasn't exciting work, and no one expected her to do more than the basics, but Pam approached it carefully. She reviewed the old files, corrected small errors others had missed, and even made a note of patterns that didn't make sense. When she turned it in, Dennis barely looked at it before saying, "Good job. We'll see how it goes." 2 days later, that same report caught the attention of the client, who called the department to say it was the clearest and most accurate version they'd seen in months. Dennis looked surprised, then glanced at Pam's desk across the room. She didn't seem to notice his stare. She was already working on her next task, as calm as ever. Still, not everyone was impressed. Some coworkers whispered that she was just lucky, or that Dennis had probably helped her. Others ignored her completely. Pam didn't respond. She came in every morning with the same calm smile, greeting everyone politely and focusing on her work. One afternoon, a group of staff gathered in the break room, chatting about the new project they had to deliver in a week. They complained about how hard it was and how little time they had. Pam quietly listened, sipping her tea. When someone asked if she was worried, she said softly, "Deadlines are always tight, but if we plan it right, we'll be fine." One of them laughed and replied, "You'll see soon enough. Planning doesn't work here." That night, while most of them left on time, Pam stayed a little longer. She looked through the project files, made a few notes, and outlined a better structure that could save time. She didn't tell anyone. She wasn't trying to prove a point. She just wanted to do things right. By the end of her second week, people had started to notice that she didn't complain, gossip, or rush. She never joined in when others mocked the management or blamed each other for delays. She simply worked, and her calmness had a quiet effect on the few who sat near her. Some even found themselves lowering their voices when she was around. Dennis, the team leader, began watching her more closely, not in a suspicious way, but with growing curiosity. He had seen ambitious employees before, but Pam didn't seem like one of them. She wasn't trying to stand out or impress anyone, yet somehow her work always turned out better than expected. One day he walked over and asked, "Pam, how do you manage to stay so calm when everyone else is stressing out?" She looked up from her notes and smiled. "I just focus on what I can control," she said. "Getting nervous won't change the deadline." That simple answer stayed with him. He didn't say it out loud, but he admired her mindset. Weeks went by, and Pam became a quiet rhythm in the chaos of the office. People still underestimated her. Some even forgot she was there until her work made them notice. When meetings got heated, she listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it was always something clear, logical, and unexpected. Once, during a tense meeting, two senior staff were arguing over whose plan should move forward. The room was full of sharp voices and tired faces. Pam sat near the corner, flipping through a report. After a long silence, she looked up and said softly, "I think both plans could work if we combine them. One has strong numbers, the other has a better process. We don't have to choose, just merge the best parts." Everyone went quiet. It was such a simple idea that it made sense immediately. The argument ended and the meeting moved forward smoothly. Afterward, Dennis gave her a small nod of appreciation. It was the first sign that her quiet voice had begun to carry weight. Still, Pam didn't change her approach. She didn't start speaking more, trying to take credit. She still came in early, left a little late, and treated everyone with the same kindness, whether they respected her or not. Her focus stayed on doing the work right and staying true to herself. But deep down, she noticed everything. She noticed the tension that grew when deadlines approached, the way certain people avoided responsibility, and the way stress turned good workers into impatient ones. She kept mental notes, understanding how each small behavior added up to the bigger problems. She wasn't waiting to expose anyone or make herself look good. She just wanted to help the office function better. The truth was, Pam had faced far more stressful situations in her past jobs. She knew what it felt like to be doubted, talked over, or overlooked. But she had also learned that patience could be more powerful than confrontation. People who rush to prove themselves often burn out. People who wait and let their work speak tend to last longer. One Friday afternoon, the team gathered for an informal meeting to review progress. The room was filled with chatter until Dennis mentioned that upper management would be reviewing everyone's performance next week. The announcement made the room quiet. A few people looked nervous. Others whispered complaints. Pam, sitting in her usual corner, just nodded calmly and started making notes on how to improve her part before the review. After the meeting, one of her coworkers stopped by her desk and said, half joking, "You don't seem worried. You think you'll impress them, huh?" Pam looked up and smiled lightly. "I'm not trying to impress anyone," she said. "I just want my work to be solid." That night, as the office lights dimmed and most people had gone home, Pam was still there, finishing her reports. She checked every detail, ensuring everything was accurate and easy to follow. She knew the upcoming review was important, not just for herself but for the team. She didn't want anyone to be embarrassed by missing data or sloppy presentation. When she finally packed up her things, the office was quiet. She looked around at the empty desks and the blinking lights of computers left on sleep mode. For a moment, she smiled to herself. She knew she was still an outsider in many eyes, but she also knew that would change soon, because Pam had a plan, not to prove others wrong, but to let her actions speak for her. She believed that people might underestimate her now, but eventually, they would see what she was truly capable of, and when that moment came, it would surprise everyone who had doubted her. The morning started like any other, but there was a strange tension in the air. People were rushing through the hallways, whispering in low voices, glancing nervously toward the manager's office. Something had gone wrong, and everyone seemed to know it, except Pam, who arrived a little early as usual, calm and steady. She placed her bag on the desk, watered the small plant by her computer, and noticed the uneasy faces around her. When she asked a coworker what was happening, the answer came in a hushed tone. "The main client report, they found errors in it, big ones. Management's furious." Pam's brow softened. She didn't panic. Instead, she quietly asked, "Which report?" It was the same project everyone had been working on for weeks, the one several departments had contributed to. It was supposed to go to a top client, and now the numbers didn't add up. Some data had been entered incorrectly, causing major confusion. The team leader, Dennis, was pacing near the meeting room, his tie slightly loosened and his tone sharp as he gave directions. People were scrambling to fix the mess, opening old files, double-checking numbers, and blaming one another. The usual calm of the morning was gone. Pam stood at her desk watching for a moment. Then she pulled her notebook closer. opened the project file and began reviewing it quietly. She didn't want to add to the noise. She wanted to understand what went wrong. Within an hour, she began noticing patterns. The same set of figures had been copied from an older version of the report, one that was outdated. She flipped between files, tracing the issue back to one department that hadn't updated their section on time. It wasn't malicious, just carelessness under pressure. Meanwhile, the office was buzzing. People were talking over one another, some panicking about what the manager would say. A few even suggested deleting parts of the report and redoing them entirely, which would have wasted even more time. Pam finally stood up and walked toward Dennis's office. He was surrounded by staff, frustration clear on his face. When she knocked lightly and stepped in, he sighed. "Pam, not now, please. We're in the middle of a crisis." "I know," she said quietly, "but I think I've found where the problem started." Her calm tone caught his attention. "You what?" She handed him her notebook, open to a page filled with neat notes and arrows connecting figures. These numbers were copied from an older version. The rest of the report was updated, but this section wasn't. That's why the totals don't match. Dennis blinked at the page, reading it twice. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes. If we correct these entries and recalculate the summary, everything should align again. It's not as bad as it looks, it just needs careful review." He looked at her for a long second before saying, "All right, do it." Pam went back to her desk and started working quickly but carefully. While others panicked, she stayed calm. She didn't shout or order anyone around, she simply focused. When someone came by to complain about missing data, she gently asked them to send her what they had. When another person started blaming a teammate, she stopped them and said, "Let's just fix it first. We can talk later." Her voice was steady and it carried a quiet authority that people didn't expect from her. Slowly, the chaos began to settle. By late afternoon, she had fixed most of the numbers. Dennis came by several times, checking in, each time more surprised by how organized her work was. "You're sure this will work?" he asked once. Pam looked up and said softly, "It already is." When the final version of the report was complete, she double-checked every section. Then she handed it to Dennis, who sent it to management. That evening, when the department head called for a short meeting, everyone gathered, nervous and tired. The head of the office, a serious woman known for her no-nonsense approach, stood at the front with the corrected report in hand. "I just reviewed this," she said. "It's perfect now. Whoever caught the issue, good job." There was silence in the room. Everyone looked around, wondering who it was. Dennis spoke up. "It was Pam," he said simply. All eyes turned to her. Pam, sitting near the corner, looked a little surprised to be mentioned. The department head nodded slightly. "Well done," she said. "You saved us from a serious problem." Pam smiled politely and said, "Just doing my part." The meeting ended soon after, but the mood in the room had changed. People who had doubted her were whispering again, but this time their tone was different. It wasn't disbelief. It was curiosity and respect. Later that evening, as the office emptied out, one of her co-workers stopped by her desk. "How did you even figure that out?" they asked. Pam smiled gently. "I just looked at everything slowly. When people rush, they miss details. But if you breathe and take your time, the answer usually shows itself." It was such a simple explanation, yet it carried so much truth. The next few days, things around the office felt different. People greeted her more kindly. Some even started asking for her advice on small tasks. She didn't let it go to her head. She remained the same, calm, polite, focused. But Dennis noticed the change. He began trusting her with slightly more responsibility. When there was a complex task or a project that needed organization, he would say, "Pam, could you take a look at this?" She always agreed without hesitation. One morning he called her into his office and said, "You have a way of staying calm under pressure that I haven't seen in a while. How do you do it?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I've learned that stress doesn't solve problems. Understanding them does. If you stay calm, people around you start to calm down too." He nodded thoughtfully. "You might be right." As weeks passed, Pam became an unexpected pillar of stability in the department. People who once ignored her started to rely on her quiet judgment. Even when she wasn't in charge, she influenced how others behaved simply through her composure. But one morning, another challenge arrived. A higher-up from headquarters sent word that they wanted the department to present a detailed review of their recent projects, something that would reflect their progress and efficiency. The problem was the timeline was nearly impossible. They had only a few days to prepare it, and everyone knew it involved rechecking months of data. When the news broke, the same pattern returned: panic, frustration, arguments. Pam watched quietly, her mind already turning. She knew the workload was heavy, but she also knew that chaos would only waste more time. She stood up, walked to Dennis's desk, and said calmly, "If we divide the work carefully, we can finish it, but we need a clear plan." He looked at her, then at the team, and nodded. "All right, let's hear it." Pam quickly outlined a schedule on the whiteboard, dividing tasks into sections. She assigned each group a specific responsibility and created small checkpoints to make sure no one fell behind. It wasn't complicated, just structured and fair. At first, a few people doubted her again. "That'll never work," someone muttered. But Pam didn't argue. "Let's just try," she said softly. By the end of the day, her plan was already showing results. People who usually argued were working side by side. Files were being updated faster, errors were caught early, and the team moved with a sense of direction they hadn't felt in a long time. Dennis watched the progress unfold and realized something. Pam hadn't just fixed the earlier mistake. She had started to fix the way the office worked. On the final day before the deadline, Pam stayed late again, reviewing everything line by line. When she finally closed her laptop, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need applause. Knowing the work was solid was enough. The next morning, the report was sent off, and the department received an email from headquarters later that afternoon. It was short but powerful. "Excellent work. Efficient and well presented. Keep it up." Dennis printed the email and pinned it to the notice board. The staff clapped lightly, smiling. Pam sat at her desk, her hands folded, smiling faintly. Dennis walked over and said, "You know, you've surprised all of us." She looked up, amused. "How so?" "I think we all underestimated you at first," he said honestly. "But you've proven yourself again and again." Pam shrugged gently. "People don't have to believe in you right away," she said. "They just have to see your work." He nodded, impressed. "You've got that right." That evening, as she packed her things, Pam glanced around the office. It wasn't the same place it had been when she started. There was less tension in the air, fewer arguments, and a new sense of quiet respect that hadn't existed before. She smiled softly to herself. Change didn't always come through loud voices or grand speeches. It often started with small, steady actions that spoke louder than words. And without even realizing it, Pam had become the calm center of a place that used to thrive on chaos. The morning sunlight filtered through the office blinds, casting soft lines across Pam's desk. The air felt different now. People who once rushed past her without a glance now greeted her warmly. Some even asked for her opinion before sending in their reports. She had earned quiet respect, not because she demanded it, but because she proved time after time that she could be trusted. After the success of the last project, the department's image had improved. Management had noticed, and there was talk of new opportunities coming in. But along with recognition came pressure. The next project on the list was much bigger, involving multiple clients and tighter deadlines. Everyone knew that a single mistake could undo all the progress they had made. Pam could sense the nervousness in the team. The chatter in the break room wasn't light anymore. It was filled with anxious talk about timelines and workload. Dennis, the team leader, looked tired. He was trying to keep everyone focused, but it was clear that the constant stress was wearing him down. One afternoon, he called Pam into his office. He looked at her seriously before saying, "I need your help on this one. You've got a way of keeping things steady, and I could use that right now." Pam nodded. "Tell me what needs to be done." He handed her a thick folder full of papers and sighed. "This project has 3 teams working on different sections, and none of them are communicating well. Deadlines are overlapping and mistakes keep repeating. I need someone to bring order to all this." Pam opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. The details were messy. Numbers didn't line up, timelines clashed, and instructions were unclear. She looked up and said calmly, "We'll fix it. But we'll have to start by getting everyone in the same room." Dennis smiled slightly. "That's going to be fun," he said with a tired laugh. The next morning, Pam sent out a meeting invitation to all the team heads. When they gathered, the room was filled with tension. Some looked frustrated, others defensive. Pam stood by the whiteboard with her notebook in hand. She didn't start by pointing fingers. Instead, she began with a simple sentence. We're all trying to do the same thing, make this project work. So let's figure out how to help each other, not trip over one another. The tone of her voice was calm but confident. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation to cooperate. Slowly, the energy in the room shifted. She went through each team's plan, asking questions, listening carefully, and writing down the key points. Whenever a disagreement started, she redirected the conversation with quiet authority. Let's look at the data first, she'd say. Or we can solve that later. What's the immediate issue? By the end of the meeting, everyone had a clearer picture of what needed to be done. Tasks were reassigned, deadlines reorganized, and responsibilities clarified. When the meeting ended, people left the room feeling lighter. Dennis watched from the corner, quietly impressed. After everyone left, he said, "You've got a way of making people listen without pushing them." Pam smiled. People just need to feel heard. Once they do, they're willing to work together. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the office began to change again. Pam was at the center of it, never loud, never bossy, but always steady. When something went wrong, people went to her first. When things went right, they gave her quiet credit even if she never asked for it. She stayed late most nights, not because she had to, but because she wanted to make sure everything was on track. The glow of her computer screen was often the last light in the office. She would review reports, correct small details, and leave notes for her coworkers to find the next morning. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as she was packing up, Dennis stopped by her desk. "You don't have to keep doing this alone, you know," he said gently. Pam smiled. "I'm not doing it alone. Everyone's trying their best. I'm just helping things stay balanced." He shook his head. "You've got a strange kind of strength, Pam. It's not loud, but it holds everything together." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Sometimes quiet things are stronger than we think." As the project neared its final phase, there was a sudden setback. One of the client representatives sent a message saying they weren't satisfied with a section of the presentation. It wasn't Pam's part, but it affected the entire project's timeline. Panic started spreading again. Some staff began arguing, trying to figure out who to blame. Pam stayed silent for a moment, listening to the commotion. Then she spoke softly but clearly. "Let's fix it before we fight about it." Her voice cut through the noise like a calm wave over stormy water. Everyone turned toward her. She pulled up the client's feedback, read it carefully, and said, "They're not upset about the data. They're confused about how it's presented. We just need to explain it better." Without wasting time, she drafted a new version of that section, simplifying the layout and making the message clearer. When she showed it to Dennis, he smiled. "That's exactly what they wanted," he said. "You just saved us again." Pam shrugged gently. "It's a team win," she replied. The next day, the client responded with praise, saying the revision was perfect. The tension that had filled the office for days finally eased. People were smiling again. Word spread quickly. Pam had done it again. Even those who once ignored her were now openly admiring her. A few stopped by her desk just to thank her. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She simply said, "We did it together," and went back to work. As the deadline approached, the team worked more smoothly than ever before. There was laughter again, light conversations during coffee breaks, and an ease that hadn't been there for months. Pam's calmness had become contagious. Even the most impatient employees found themselves taking a breath before reacting. On the final night before the project submission, everyone stayed late to finish the last bits. The office lights glowed against the dark windows, and the air was filled with a quiet sense of determination. Pam moved from desk to desk, checking on people, offering small words of encouragement. "Almost there," she'd say softly. "You're doing great." Around midnight, they finally completed everything. When Dennis pressed send to submit the final file, the whole room broke into applause. It wasn't loud or wild, it was full of relief and pride. People looked at one another with smiles that said, "We actually did it." Pam leaned back in her chair, exhausted but happy. She didn't crave the spotlight. Just seeing everyone proud of their work was enough for her. The next morning, the department head called an urgent meeting. Everyone gathered, wondering if something had gone wrong, but when she walked in, she was smiling. "I just received feedback from the client," she said. "They're beyond impressed. They said this is the most organized and professional project they've received from us in years. The room erupted in applause again, this time louder. The department head nodded toward Pam and added, "Special thanks to Pam for coordinating and keeping this project together." Pam stood up briefly, her face calm but humble. "Thank you," she said softly. "But everyone played a part. I couldn't have done it without all of you." Her sincerity touched people. It wasn't just her work ethic. It was her humility that made others respect her more. After the meeting, several co-workers came to her desk. One said quietly, "You changed how this place feels." Another added, "You made us believe we could actually enjoy working here again." Pam smiled warmly. "It wasn't me," she said. "We just started listening to each other." That day, as she packed up her things to head home early for once, she paused at the door and looked back at the office. The same space that had once been filled with chaos and ego now felt lighter, friendlier, and alive. People were smiling at one another, helping each other, sharing small jokes. She felt a quiet pride, not for herself, but for what the team had become. Sometimes leadership doesn't come from a title. It comes from actions, patience, and the way you treat people when things go wrong. Pam hadn't tried to take charge. She simply filled the space where calm was needed most, and now that calm had spread. For the first time in a long while, the office didn't just look like a workplace, it felt like a team. And everyone knew who had made that possible, even if she never said it out loud. The weeks after the big project felt lighter for everyone. For the first time in months, the office was quiet in a good way. People weren't rushing to fix mistakes or blaming each other. There was laughter during coffee breaks, small talks near the copier, and a sense of calm that hadn't existed before. Pam noticed it quietly, often smiling to herself when she saw people helping one another without being asked. The department had gone from being a room full of tension to a team that actually worked together. And though no one said it openly, everyone knew that Pam was the reason behind it. Her quiet strength had changed the rhythm of the entire office. Dennis, the team leader, looked more relaxed these days. He had learned to delegate better and trust others. He often found himself looking toward Pam's desk for reassurance whenever a new challenge appeared. It wasn't just her skill that impressed him, it was the calm she brought wherever she went. One Monday morning, an unexpected email arrived from the head office. They were planning a quarterly meeting to review progress and performance across departments. Each team had to present their achievements and challenges from the past few months. The best performing department would receive recognition and a small award. Dennis immediately knew what this meant. Their team had done exceptionally well thanks to Pam's steady hand. But he also knew she wasn't one to take credit easily. He walked over to her desk later that morning and said, "We've been asked to present our quarterly results next week. I'd like you to represent the team." Pam looked up surprised. "Me?" "Yes," Dennis said with a smile. "You've been the backbone of everything we've done lately. You deserve to be the one to present it." Pam hesitated. She wasn't afraid of speaking, but she preferred to stay behind the scenes. "I don't know," she said softly. "You're the team leader. It should be you." He shook his head. "No, it should be the person who made the biggest difference. And that's you." She paused for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Over the next few days, she prepared the presentation. She gathered reports, graphs, and feedback from team members. But she didn't just want to show numbers. She wanted to show the story of how the department had grown. She included small examples of teamwork, lessons learned, and how people supported one another when things got tough. When the day of the meeting arrived, everyone in the office seemed a little more nervous than usual. The conference room was filled with department heads, managers, and executives from the head office. Pam sat quietly at the table with her notes in front of her, taking a slow breath. When it was their turn, Dennis introduced her. "This is Pam Bondi," he said. "She's been a vital part of our success, and she'll be presenting our department's progress." Pam stood up, her calm presence filling the room. She didn't start with fancy words or dramatic gestures. She began simply, "Good morning, everyone. Over the past few months, our team has faced several challenges, but each one taught us something valuable. We learned the importance of patience, communication, and trust." As she spoke, people listened closely. There was something genuine about her voice. It wasn't rehearsed or overconfident. It was honest. She talked about the mistakes they had made, the lessons they took from them, and how the team came together to fix what went wrong. She shared how small acts of cooperation turned chaos into order. She ended her presentation with a simple line. "The biggest success we've had isn't just completing projects on time, it's learning to believe in one another." When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, before breaking into applause. Even the executives at the front table nodded approvingly. After the meeting, several people approached her to congratulate her. One senior manager said, "That was one of the most sincere presentations I've heard in a long time. You got something special, Pam." She smiled and thanked them politely, then returned to her team. They were waiting outside the conference room, looking anxious. When they saw her smile, they all cheered quietly. Dennis grinned and said, "I knew you'd do great." Pam laughed softly. "It wasn't me," she said. "It was all of us." Later that afternoon, the department head sent an email to the entire company announcing that their team had been recognized as the top-performing department of the quarter. There were congratulatory messages pouring in from other branches. The office erupted in celebration. People clapped, some hugged, and there was a sense of real joy in the air. Pam stayed near her desk watching the happiness around her. She didn't crave attention, but she couldn't deny the warmth she felt seeing everyone proud of what they had built together. When the noise settled, Dennis came to her desk again. "You really stunned them all," he said with a grin. "Everyone thought you were just quiet and polite when you first joined." "No one saw this coming." Pam smiled gently. "That's okay," she said. "Sometimes being underestimated gives you space to grow without anyone watching." He nodded slowly, realizing how true that was. As the day went on, people kept stopping by to thank her, some even apologizing for how they had once dismissed her. She didn't hold it against anyone. She just listened and smiled, saying, "We all learn as we go." That evening, as the sun began to set and most people had gone home, Pam stayed back for a while, sitting quietly at her desk. The office was silent again, but this time it was peaceful. She looked around the room that had once felt cold and unfriendly. Now it felt alive, full of small memories of teamwork, laughter, and shared effort. She leaned back in her chair and thought about how far things had come. When she first walked into the office, people had judged her based on how she looked and how softly she spoke. They saw calmness as weakness. But over time, she had shown that real strength doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's about patience, consistency, and choosing to act when others panic. Her journey in that office wasn't just about proving herself, it was about helping others see a different way to lead. The next morning, when she arrived, there was a small surprise waiting for her. On her desk was a card signed by everyone in the department. Inside it said, "Thank you for reminding us what teamwork really means. You've changed how we see things, and we're grateful for you." Pam smiled as she read it. It wasn't an award or a title, but it meant more than anything else. She carefully placed the card beside her photo frame and small plant, the same ones she had brought on her first day. As the day went on, life in the office returned to normal. People worked, laughed, and carried on. But something had shifted forever. The way they spoke to each other, the way they approached problems, it all carried traces of what Pam had taught them without ever giving a lecture. Later that week, Dennis stopped by her desk one last time before heading to a meeting. "You know," he said, "when you first walked in here, most of us thought you wouldn't last a month. You were too quiet for this place." Pam chuckled softly. "I remember," he smiled. "But you ended up teaching us more than anyone else ever did." She looked at him with that familiar calmness in her eyes. "It's easy to underestimate quiet people," she said, "but sometimes quiet people are just saving their energy for the right moment." He laughed. "Well, you picked the perfect moment." After he left, Pam turned back to her computer, her heart full. She didn't need praise or applause. The real reward was knowing she had made a difference, not through loud words, but through steady actions that spoke for themselves. That evening, as she left the office, the hallway lights dimmed behind her. She took one last look at the place that had once doubted her and whispered under her breath, "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude for the job, it was for the journey, the lessons and the quiet victories that shaped her. Because sometimes, life doesn't need to shout to make an impact. Sometimes, it just needs someone who believes that calmness can change everything. And Pam Bondi had proved exactly that.